Thank you for that very well-planned introduction. Um, so, after college, I joined the Peace Corps. I'm sure most people in this room would be familiar with the program, but if you're not, it's a U.S. government program that sends mostly uh, kids without any experience to places like Africa and in other places. Um, Actually, when I was going through the whole sign-up process, I got to pick where in the world I wanted to go. I picked every region except for the Pacific Islands and Africa, and so they sent me to Kenya. While I was there, I was training people in a town called Ugunja about small business and ICT, which is information communication technology. So fast forward to, after I was out of the Peace Corps, I got a nice job at a company called CNET. I was working in a nice air-conditioned office, and everything was great. I was set. This was going to be the job that I was going to have for a very long time. And then in late December 2007, early 2008, there was post-election violence in Kenya. So that was the country where I was stationed, and I still had colleagues who were there. And Peace Corps has these different policies for when certain things happen. So the elections were coming up, but Kenya was a very stable country, so they just told everybody to stay home, don't really go out, don't bother going to work today, just kind of hang out in your house. Another step is to consolidate all of the volunteers into these different places around the country. It's usually 3 or 4 different regions that people get together. And then finally, it's evacuation. So they just took the first step and they told everybody to stay home. Well, then the post-election violence happened. Had they had the foresight to see this coming, they would have consolidated and just taken everybody home. Unfortunately, everybody was now stuck in their houses. Some people were in regions that weren't as severely affected, so they were okay. But actually, I was stationed in an area that was very bad, had very bad violence. So I was trying to look for information, but there was no information. It was very difficult to find reports because there really weren't very many journalists on the ground. And actually, there was even a media blackout in Kenya itself, so people weren't able to get any information when they were in Kenya, right? They were actually showing World Wrestling Federation and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reruns during the violence, so the people couldn't even see what was happening in the village next to them, right? So these 4 Kenyans got together. They were just bloggers, right? And they had this idea to come up with a map and get SMS messages from people on the ground, and have them put that onto the map so then people can see what was happening. And this, for me, when I found this website, it was amazing. There were all these reports on there, and none of the reports were coming from any official sources. They were just coming from individuals who felt the need to report on what was happening around them. So actually, most of my colleagues who were there, they didn't have internet connections that were so great to load Google Maps and see all these points and everything, but they were able to chat, so I was relaying information from this map to them, and then they could make up their own decisions for what they wanted to do moving forward. So actually, my neighbor was in Busia. I'm not sure if you're too familiar with Kenya, but this was right on the border with Uganda, and it was actually difficult to cross this border. And I was talking with her while everything was happening, and she was telling me about hearing gunfire and riots in the streets and just all this horrible stuff. And she was able to use that information plus the information I was able to give her from this website, which are all citizen-reported reports, to get out of the country. She actually snuck out with a priest, pretending like she was a part of the clergy, right, or part of the church community, so that they actually let them through, because they're very religious people, so they're not going to deny a priest and the people who work with the priest from crossing the border. So she was safe. All of my colleagues were safe, by the way, so nobody was injured. Foreigners weren't really being targeted in the violence, so fortunate for us, I guess. So the 4 founders, it was 2 women and 2 men. had never really intended to do this as a full-time gig, right? So the website got enough popularity that they ended up getting about $70,000 in funding from the Knight Foundation. And that is actually a very minuscule amount of money for 4 people, but they all decided to go at this 100%. So then I saw that they started this open source project, and this is only a few months after the violence had happened, so I decided to volunteer, and here I am. We mostly only hire volunteers, by the way, so if you want to work for us, you can volunteer. So almost exactly 2 years after the first, we call them deployment of Ushahidi in Kenya, there was the earthquake that hit Haiti. And this was in January 2010. It's not the violence that we're all talking about, but this is a very massive event. And we deployed our own platform so we could, we like to say, eat our own dog food, or we say eat our own filet mignon, right, because it's great. So we're now deploying our own software in Haiti, and we partnered with the Reuters Foundation and a few other groups, other technology groups, and we launched the only shortcode for emergency response in Haiti. It was 4636. And we got about 50,000 text messages from Haitians on the ground, and we were able to take these, parse through them, do translation. I've got a great chart that I could put up here, but I don't have any slides or anything. But essentially, we took all of these messages and we got them onto a map within a few minutes of each message coming through. And we had volunteers from the Haitian diaspora who were doing translations from Haitian Creole and French to English, and then we were passing that off to members of the U.S. Coast Guard who were doing search and rescue types of activities in Haiti. And actually, in one case, there was a woman that was pregnant, and she started to go into labor while all this was happening. And there was an SMS message that was sent describing, where they were and what was happening. And a volunteer at Tufts University, this is actually a massive effort, right? So we have all these volunteers at Tufts University and all over the web who are geolocating these messages. And geolocating is basically just taking the contents of the message, and it might mention, we're at the supermarket that burned down last year, and so then they get all these people together to figure out and pinpoint exactly where that is. Well, this SMS for help for this pregnant woman came through, and the report was put on the map. We passed it off to the Coast Guard, and they were able to go and assist in the delivery of this child. So it was quite amazing. But natural disasters, of course, aren't man-made disasters, but the platform can be used for these human-made human disasters. We have tens of thousands of deployments. We don't actually do any of these deployments ourselves anymore. After we learned in Haiti, it takes a lot of work and effort to launch one of these projects. We weren't very experienced going into that. And so now we just give our software away for free to organizations who really know what they're doing to map these things. So we have tens of thousands of deployments in over 160 countries right now. And the big thing that we learned is, if you can imagine, again, this isn't got another great graphic for this. You just have to imagine it. Imagine an egg, right, with the yolk in the middle. Imagine if that yolk was maybe half the size or maybe a quarter of the size, really small. That's kind of what the graphic looks like. It's about 10% of the entire area, right? And that's the technology portion of the projects, and that's where we come in. Really, 90% of the effort and the work are groups like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, who can actually go out and solicit responses from individuals and get that stuff on the map. So speaking about violence against women specifically, I took the time to find a few deployments out of the tens of thousands that are out there that focus on on this specific issue. And I'm just going to list a couple of these. And like I said, we're just the technology component, so I can't really speak to the process exactly. I have some ideas since I speak with deployers one-on-one, but I don't actually do these deployments, right? I'm learning a lot being here. I should really be sitting in the audience. So one very popular map is called Harass Map. And if you're interested in any of these, you can come in and talk to me afterwards, and I have all of the web addresses for these specific deployments, if you'd like to go and check them out for yourself. But this Harass Map is a mapping program in Egypt, and more specifically Cairo, which is soliciting messages from individuals who are talking about a lot of things like catcalling on the street, sexual harassment, in some cases rape and things of that nature. People are able to submit to this platform, and it gets put on a map. So you can go and look at the map, and you can see where all of these things are happening. Another one is called Take Back the Tech. This one is mapping virtual harassment. So it doesn't actually happen in a certain place, but this is a cyberbullying component to a lot of this too. I mean, you can be sexually harassed and not actually see the person who is harassing you. So this is actually mapping some of those issues against women. There's another one called Maps for Aid, and this one is similar to Harass Map, but it's in India, right? And there seems to be more of a focus on rape and abuse and sexual harassment on this particular map. I just have a couple more here. I'm just going through the list. So we have another one that's actually active right now. It's called Meet Us on the Street. And it's mapping an activist event that's currently going on. I guess it got started on March 18th, and it's going on until March 24th. And it's Anti-Street Harassment Week. So what they're doing is they have all of these events around the world, and they're mapping what's happening at all of these events. So these don't have to be specific people submitting reports about what's happening. It can be about different things like activist events too. There's another map that's coming out pretty soon. It's called, I wasn't going to mention it, but I just got a note saying it was okay. That women under siege in Syria. And what they're doing is they're going to be mapping instances of rape by government and non-governmental forces. And I've actually been looking at this deployment quite a bit over the past week or so. And it looks like it's going to be doing some very intense work. Just even reading the category names for the different reports. They're changed? Okay. So anyway, so that's going to be one to look at. And that one's going to be womenunderSiegeSyria.crowdmap.com. So
And it should be launching next Wednesday.
So next Wednesday, keep your eyes on the internet. So there's some other non-women related deployments. Another big one in Syria right now is called Syria Tracker. And that's tracking eyewitness reports and refugees, killings, and that sort of thing, and putting it on the map so you can go and get a better idea of what's happening in Syria. And there are actually groups like Amnesty International who are experimenting with the platform quite a bit in Saudi Arabia last year. So beyond the violence issues, a lot of media organizations have taken this platform to use it. We've seen like the Guardian newspaper tracking a few things. They actually had a pretty funny deployment when the Pope was coming to visit. People were able to submit reports about the Pope coming. And one guy submitted a report that said, I witnessed a miracle. I found my car keys. So Al Jazeera is using the platform now, and they've been soliciting reports from people in Somalia for their Somalia Speaks feature on their website. And that was set up for a conference in London to have people in Somalia essentially submit their messages to people at this conference so they could have a voice and not actually be there. And they've also just launched another version of that, but in Uganda, to solicit reports from individuals about how they feel about the recent viral Kony campaign. So it's really interesting to see how people, maybe not so much anymore, but people were getting really excited in the West about the Kony campaign. But when you actually read reports from individual Ugandans who are SMSing their reports because they might not have a computer, or tweeting, if they're from Kampala or a larger city, they probably have better internet access, so they're able to submit longer reports. But you can actually go and look at those features on the Al Jazeera website, and that's utilizing the platform. So why are maps important is a really interesting question. It's not just a way to put information out there. It's essentially, if you're not mapped, you don't exist, right? So if you're a number in a report, not that many people are really going to read it. If you're a number on a graph, not that many people are really going to take the time to look at it and understand it. But if you're a point on a map, people can instantly understand that something happened on that point at a certain place at a certain time. And that's really the power of mapping these reports. And one really good example of the reason why maps are so important was a project that was done by, we like to say, like, friends of Ushahidi, called OpenStreetMap. And OpenStreetMap is like the Wikipedia of maps, right? Anybody can go and edit these maps and create maps and share them with everybody. And they did a project called Map Kibera. And Kibera is, a lot of people say it's the largest slum in Africa, which isn't actually true, but it's, if you were to go there on Google Maps and you go to where Kibera is, it's just a big gray spot. They don't exist. So what they did is OpenStreetMap went in and they trained the people who are living in Kibera how to use these GPS units, and they donated these GPS units to these people. And they were able to go and map what was important in their community, right? So they picked all the religious institutions, they picked the places where they can go use the bathroom, get clean water, that sort of thing. And those maps were created and incorporated into OpenStreetMap. So now if you use OpenStreetMap, which is actually now being used by Foursquare, it's what fuels MapQuest, and a bunch of other large websites are now switching to use OpenStreetMap. They now exist. So now, if you go and see where Kibera is, you can now have a visual representation of that. So all this sounds very serious. There's one deployment I really want to point out, and it really means a lot to me. There's a deployment called Burger Map, and it's mapping the best cheeseburger in America. So this is a deployment where you can go and take a picture of a cheeseburger, maybe some French fries, maybe there's a beer or something, and you can talk about how great this place is, and it gets mapped on a map. Currently, it's only in the U.S., as far as I know, so sorry if you're not from there. But we don't always have to take this stuff so seriously. We found that if we use fun examples and really get people used to using this technology, they'll be a lot more open to using it when it really matters. So somebody who's deploying the Burger Map will know what to do if there's a natural disaster or if something serious is happening. They can very easily use those same skills to do that type of work. So that's essentially it. Yeah, thank you.